Good morning everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, this channel is all about 3D graphics, mostly focusing on photogrammetry, sculpting and getting all of that stuff into Unreal Engine. So I'm a VFX veteran. I worked many years in the movie industry, doing Marvel movies, etc. as an environment artist. And now I'm building environments for the Epic Fab marketplace. If you're interested in 3D graphics, why not subscribe? I am just getting started. So in my last episode I was talking about which software to use, which are my favorite softwares, and there's a link to that in the corner up here. And today we're going to talk about hardware. I made a lot of mistakes when I was buying my stuff. I really wanted the best and I really overpaid, and this video is going to be all about dialing in exactly what you need to get started with doing photogrammetry. Really high-end photogrammetry, and bringing it into Unreal Engine as good as possible without paying too much money for it. So let's dig into it. So there are three topics I want to cover today, and that is the computer setup, and then there are the cameras that you need for photogrammetry, and I will also quickly talk about some peripherals, what kind of screen to get and a few other things. First, let's talk about the graphic card. That's going to be your biggest purchase, of course. And I got a 4090. So this is 1.5 years ago when I first bought it, and I really had to overpay. It is a fantastic card, but I probably shouldn't have gotten that, and I'll explain why. So first of all, forget about the 5090. It's not even on the table. That's going to be quite overpaying for something that you're not going to use. Hopefully maybe the 4090s gets a bit cheaper then. Now the reason why the 4090 is just too good for the kind of work that I'm doing is, for instance, in this scene here, I really overloaded it with stuff. And in a 4090, you can easily get to 100 FPS without breaking a sweat. Like, you just keep on putting things in. But when I have to send this away to Epic for a review before they put it on the store, they are running 3090 cards. And if you get like 80 to 100 in a 4090 card, you might end up getting like 3 to 5 frames on a 3090 card. It was sent back to me a couple of times just because of that, and it's really hard for me to dial in exactly the frame rate that's needed for most users out there. So if Epic is using 3090 cards as a standard, that's probably a good idea for you to do that as well. It would avoid quite a lot of problems, because I really had to scale down, and I stopped when I got to 120 FPS. And then I just have the chance that this time it's going to run good on a 3090 card. I would recommend skipping out on the 4090 and just go to the 3090 and use that one. It's going to save you a lot of headaches and a lot of money. Now, which processors do you need? Because of the work that I'm doing at the moment, going from photogrammetry and into Unreal, the processor is not going to be as important, so I don't recommend getting one of those Threadrippers, for instance. They are just, well, they're not even overkill. They're actually worse for the stuff that you want to do. Or what you are looking for is the processor with the highest single core clock frequency. So I got a Ryzen 9 7950X 16 core 4.5 gigahertz. It was the top of the line when it came up in the Ryzen lineup, but then you got the Threadrippers as well. But what the Threadrippers do is they have a ton of cores, but they're actually slower and they cost an absolute fortune. What they also do, they allow you to have a bit more higher memory and that kind of things. It's not necessarily bad if you're going to do Houdini simulations, which eats a ton of memory, where I would say 120 gigabyte memory is probably the absolute minimum you should have if you're going to do that kind of work. So there's no end to it then. But for my kind of work, a faster single core processor is the way to go. You are going to use just a single core for 95% of all the tools. It really is only rendering, like old school bucket rendering, that will use all the cores from a Threadripper. Not even if you do a Houdini simulation with fluids, you're going to use all the cores. It's just going to use a few effectively, and the rest is just going to be duds. So you're better off getting something a little bit more reasonably priced. Now, how much RAM should you buy? As much as possible, you would think. So the Ryzen and the motherboard for the Ryzen supports 128 gigabytes, but there is a catch. Once you go over 64, you almost halve the speed of the memory, which is like, that's maybe not what you want. So my recommendation is to get 64 gigabyte and then wait and see what your workflow is going to demand. If you get a lot of crashes running out of memory and stuff, then of course just put the money in to get to 128. I have, surprisingly enough, made it very far with just 64 gigabyte. I was sure I was going to have 128. Often when I work out at companies, I really need 128 gigabytes. I often have 256 gigabytes as well, but then I'm doing slightly different things that I'm doing now. It's bigger environments, lots more scattering, and more in Houdini work. So there might be a case for me in the future to go to 128, but for everything that you see me doing now, 64 is just fine. It really works. I don't have any problems with it. What you are really going to need a lot of is SSD storage space, and particularly the NVMe kind. So when I got this computer 1.5 years ago back, I just got 2 terabytes, and I thought, oh, that's fine. It sounds like plenty. Well, it isn't. You fill that up in just a blink. A couple of terabytes these days is really nothing, especially when you're doing this kind of work. Reality capture is extremely hungry. Even a moderate project can easily generate 500 gigabytes of cache, and sometimes up to terabytes. And if you find yourself in that situation where you're doing your project, you haven't saved it because you can't save it when the drive gets filled up, the panic starts happening, and you need to find a drive to unload stuff so you actually can save it. It turns into a big mess, actually. And I lived through it. I had to run down to the store, get another drive, SSD, so I just could plug it in and get stuff over there so I could actually save my project because it's been cooking for many hours and I didn't want to lose that. And quite often it's also creates a mess on the drives. You start flipping things from one drive to another and da-da-da. So get big drives from the get-go. And I recommend getting the 4 terabyte ones. And I have now 4 drives. They're not all 4 terabyte. I got 2 4 terabyte drives, and then I got 2 2 terabyte drives. It's now never enough. It's so intensely hungry. And you don't need to get the fastest one. I recommend, of course, getting the fastest one for C drive, where you have all the programs and things like that. You can splurge a little bit. Now, if you get the previous generation of the NVMe, they're no slouch either. They're really super fast, and you won't notice a difference, but you'll save a lot of money. PCs are not famous for being silent, and my machine is no exception. I do recommend getting some really high quality fans. I got the Noctua fans, and I'm quite happy with them. Even though they're running at high speed all the time, they have a pleasant noise to them that doesn't irritate my ears too much. I mean, it's not a Mac by any means, but at least it doesn't have any annoying tinnitus sounding like artifacts to it. What camera should you get? It's a huge purchase and they can be quite expensive. Now, you can use pretty much any camera out there. Even your phone is going to do a good job, but I'm talking about dialing in professional quality without wasting a huge amount of money. So we're talking about the end game camera here. So the first thing to look at in a camera is stabilization. So the camera I'm using, the Nikon ZF, has 6 stops of stabilization, which makes me confidently be able to shoot in 1/60th, and I can go down to 1/30th as well. Now, low light capability is something also to consider. Quite often you can end up in murky situations in a forest or something, and you need to up the ISO a bit, and you don't want the image to fall apart immediately there. I recommend a full frame sensor. It is the sweet spot when it comes to sensors. They usually deliver the best. So around 24 megapixels is what I recommend, because if you go higher, reality capture it's not necessarily going to struggle, but you're going to get too much information. So a 50 megapixel camera might generate 1 billion polygons for just a rock object, which is way too much, because you're going to scale all that down to like 1 million in the end, so it's way overkill. Now you're also going to need a flippy screen, because quite often you need to get low on the ground. You need to get almost all the way down to the ground to get into the nooks and crevices of what you're scanning. And if you don't have a flippy screen, you're going to have to go down on your knees or even on your stomach to nail that shot. A lens. You are going to need a wide angle lens, and I recommend a 28mm. Now you can go down to 24, that would be the absolute widest before Resolve starts to struggle with connecting the pictures. So 28 and the sharpest one you can get for your system is the way to go. You are going to need a Wacom board for the sculpting. Now I started with the A4, the big Intuos Pro, went down to the A5 and then ended with this A6, which size and quality just is perfect for me, and I recommend the same. I have a BenQ color accurate screen, calibrated and everything, and I do recommend you get something similar. You don't need the top of the line, but you need something that's not showing everything completely wrong. That's it. That's all you need. Please like and subscribe for more 3D content in the future, and I'll see you around next time.